I guess my passion for dogs started when I was a preteen. I'd always grown up with dogs, and early on, because I loved to hunt, got to appreciate what a good hunting dog could do. So until I was in my 30s, I always had one or two or three hunting dogs, black Labradors, pointers, things like that. And when my children got to about the same level, they always wanted a sled dog. So one year on December 23rd, their favorite dog died of a bowel ailment. And to cheer them up, I immediately dashed out to buy a sled dog puppy. And we couldn't make up our minds, so we bought two. And a friend of mine who was along also bought one, so we had enough for a team. So then it was, Dad, can you make us a sled? So I made them a sled. And then it was, Dad, there's a race for kids. And turned out the race was part of a professional series of races. So I'd go out there and stand around in the cold and got to talking to some of the pro drivers. And one thing led to another, and they asked me to come out and see what it was like and help them train. And a couple of them became good friends over the years. And when one of them sold his team, I bought them. And then I met my current wife, Suzanne, and invited her to come up for a visit. And I think she fell in love with my dogs. She went out and bought her own dog team, even though she was still living in Louisiana, and I just boarded them for a couple of summers. And then she decided, flying up just once every few weeks wasn't good enough, so we got married and she moved to Canada. My children were just at the age where they were really keen into sports, but my son loved this dog racing much more than hockey, for example, and my youngest daughter was really into it too. So we ended up with a kennel of almost 100 dogs. My job was kind of ideal. I was still working for Fisheries and Oceans, who were delighted to have you take all of your vacation time in the winter. And southern Manitoba is a good spot for racing. We'd usually start racing in early January in Minnesota and then slowly work our way northward. And we'd take some vacation time when we got too far north to drive back every weekend. And usually after the PA, which is the big world championships at the PA, Manitoba, we'd head north and race in places like Leaf Rapids and Cross Lake and other native communities and stay with friends there. One of the criteria was that we were still into racing when we moved to Alberta, and there were 10 good races in Alberta then. We'd been to Fort McMurray, and there was a good race in Canmore. Uh, Lac La Biche started a very good race just about that time. Bonnyville, Cold Lake. So it looked like a healthy circuit. But over the years since then, we've had a succession of dry and warm winters like this one. This is not good weather for dog sledding that we're having now. And 10 years ago, we found ourselves training 50 dogs with about 30 more pups. Uh, we It was early January and we hadn't been on a sled yet. We were still pulling an ATV with them. We were down to just my wife and myself, and we had one neighbor boy helping us, but it was to be his last year because he was going away for higher education. We just decided maybe it's time we thought about doing something else. A lot of our colleagues who race dogs didn't have other jobs in the winter. They did seasonal things like gold mining or construction, and they would just move north with the dogs. And usually, recent years, spend their winters in the Yukon and Alaska. And of course, unless we wanted to quit the university, which we didn't, we weren't able to do that. So we made the big decision in 2000, and one of our friends was very interested in our team. We had some really good teams in those days, so we sold them to two teams, one an Iditarod team and the other a so-called open class driver that we knew were really good with their dogs. And we kept about 15 or 16 of our favorites, and we haven't raised any. Well, we've had one litter of pups since then, so slowly we've wound down to where now we only have a half dozen of our very favorites left, and we still take a sled out and fool around a little bit, but we're not racing seriously anymore. Got me to see a whole dimension of Canada that I wouldn't have seen, and to really appreciate the hospitality of native communities, and get to know some Aboriginal people with very similar interests and so on. It was really a good experience.